Wait a minute. There.
And just a friendly reminder, I have started the broadcast, so everyone can hear everything that we do and say.
Yeah, my screen is acting funny. Summer, can you turn off your screen so I can see mine? There you go. Thank you.
Am I good to start sharing again?
Yeah, now that I've minimized Zoom, yeah.
All right. Well, greetings, everyone. We are at the top of the hour at 2 o'clock, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, the EDGE User Group Monthly Update. This is going to be our March 2021 edition. Just a couple of housekeeping items while everybody gets settled. We are using the Zoom webinar platform for today's webinar, so your mics and cameras are disabled by default. If you have any technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat function and select all panelists, and we will work with you directly to sort it out. If at any time during the webinar you have questions for our panelists, please use the question and answer function. Please note that we will be holding questions until after the presentation. And with that, I would love to turn it over to Bill Paver for today's introduction.
Good afternoon, I guess, or good morning, depending upon where you are. I'm Bill Paver. I have been with EDGE since its inception. We worked together with a small group to create EDGE, working with people in the Office of International Services at ACRO. The IESC is sort of the direct descendant of the old National Council, which existed from basically 1955 into the 2000 decade. It succeeded the council once when the council disbanded, and it's composed of people from public and private universities and credential agencies. That's sort of the way it's always been a broadly representative group. It seeks to bring together different groups of people who are interested in this particular field, and so we get a certain kind of diversity of opinion and approach, and we think that represents what we consider a broad consensus. That's the thinking behind why IESC exists. IESC continues to collect research, questions, etc., that come to the committee. The committee then does its due diligence and investigates, does research, and either repairs what's in EDGE or adds something new to EDGE, or as systems develop different options, different diplomas, different degrees, different grading scales in other countries, they are added into EDGE. A brief thing on placement recommendations. Placement recommendations have always been with us since the inception of the field. They basically are examining a credential and then making a recommendation to the people in the field as how that credential should be viewed. Now, it's simply a recommendation. If you know this field at all, you know that there's some diversity of thought about placement recommendations and how credentials should be evaluated. This is just a membership group from a higher ed organization that's one of the oldest higher ed organizations in the country that tries to come up with what we believe is a dispassionate, honest, research-based effort to establish how you should treat these particular credentials at your institution. So with that said, that is the role of the IESC. On the next page, you can see who the members of the IESC are. I'm not going to take time to introduce each one of them, but we can say that there's a core group of 5 in here that are appointed by the executive director of ACRO. They're the voting members. In this case, Jasmine, Johnny Johnson, Nancy Katz, Jennifer Mink, Emily Say, and Robert Watkins are the voting members. The rest of us are there for a variety of reasons, most of them historical, and there's a couple of research not research assistants, but people that are selected every year. We will talk more about that later. With that said, I'd like to turn this back over to Jasmine to talk about the agenda.
Thank you so much, Bill. Hi, everybody. This is Jasmine Sadie Keenert, and I've had the pleasure of chairing the IESC, the International Education Standards Council. This has been a rewarding few years of experience for me, and just to be with colleagues who are just as passionate about international credentials as I am. Just to reiterate what Bill said, our group is a voluntary group. We're volunteers. We're not paid. This is really a passion project for us. And I'm just excited to be part of this group and to meet with everybody who joins us on the user guide on a monthly basis. Today's agenda, we have a couple of countries that we've been working on in the past few months, and we wanted to bring updates to you about that. The first three will be Ethiopian, the bachelor degree from Ethiopia. Then is Mongolia, which is the certificate of complete secondary education. We'll dive into that for you. And then the secondary school equivalency exams that we're seeing happening across the continents. Then my colleague Robert Watkins will give an update on the country of Macedonia. This is a country profile that the author Alex Popovsky has worked on this for us, and the project is complete. It's currently under review by the IESC. And then we will talk about the fellowship program that IESC has and introduce our two new fellows. And we shall wrap things up with a Q&A and some additional updates from ACRO office for you. Thank you. Let's move on to the next slide. And this is the one that I will tackle. This has to do with the Ethiopian bachelor degree that has had various life forms. It's been a 4-year program, a 3-year program, and back to a 4-year program. And this has been happening over the past 2 decades. What we had on Edge was some specific dates for these switches between the 3- and 4-year, but what was on paper was not fully enacted by the institutions. Many of us continued to see 3-year degrees as well as 4-year degrees. So there was this overlap happening, and we decided to forego the inclusion of information on the dates. We found through our colleagues at NOKUT, which is the Norwegian Agency for Quality Assurance in Education, that the dates they were reporting were not consistent with the dates we had. So it's best to let go of our commitment to including dates and look at these programs on their own. You will see the difference when you receive the transcripts. You will see 3 years or 4-year. So we have reconfigured the language for this credential on the Ethiopian country profile credential advice. So it's really crucial for you to look at the coursework and to see whether there is a substantial amount that justify it to be a 4-year versus a 3-year. And you will see that through the credits that they've earned, 90 semester credits versus 120, which seems to be the average between a 3- or a 4-year program. Thank you. And we shall move to our next slide, which is about Mongolia. And I believe, Robert, would you be interested in giving us the update on this?
Sure, I can do that. Basically, as you can see from the chart there at the bottom part of the slide, the secondary school duration has been changing over time in Mongolia. The first block you see prior to 2005, it was just 10 years. From 05 to 07, there was a transition period where it was 11. And of course, on the far right, you can see the cohort under the cohort heading when these last graduating classes were. And then finally, we've got what we have now today from 2008 onwards to today. They've now instituted a 12-year system. Basically, just as a reminder, when most of us who use the quantitative approach, which some call the year counting approach, when we do placement of credentials or admission at universities and colleges, American admissions officers get really nervous with 10-year systems. They don't have any problem with 11. If you recall that if you admit at your school with GCSEs only and from the UK, then 11 years is fine. If you admit Dutch students with just a HAVO after 11, then there's no problem with 11. And of course, several South American countries just have 11-year systems. So 11 is not a problem for us in terms of year counting. But 10 has always been a problem. And so what we would then need to do in EDGE is to have a bifurcated credential advice steps or stair steps, so that we tell you what should happen if you have the 10-year certificate, what to do with the 11 and what to do with the 12 and so on. And so you can imagine that we probably are going to be fine with 11 and 12 years as being comparable to US high school graduation, but less so with 10. Fortunately, countries that have had 10 have moved away from it. Russia was a prime example, but in the early 90s, they moved to 11. Philippines was always a problem. We actually accepted that at UT, and the placement recommendations in the book that was put out in 01, we said it was high school graduation, largely because I was chair of the council at the time, and I sort of browbeat my colleagues into accepting it because I was a co-author on the Philippine book. But the point is, 10 has always made us nervous. Well, now Philippines has done away with 10. Mongolia is doing away with 10. That's only going to leave Myanmar and Turkmenistan as the two that will be problematic for us. And so that's what we've now done in EDGE, is to show you how to approach those differently depending on the one you get on your desk. Back to you, Jasmine.
Thank you. Yes, that's a really good reminder about those various countries, Robert, that we've been dealing with that had the 10-year system. The Philippines was quite the challenge. I do recall that I remember even some of us would look at the first year of their university and shave off a first, what is it, 30 units from the first year to justify the high school deficiency requirements.
Jasmine, that I always found disgusting.
Right. So we've had that discussion many times. I know. Try and justify that today. Doesn't make sense. But I have to say, though, I must confess, I was party to that policy for many years. So, but we can change. We can change. Oh, well, the next item is also secondary. It's one of yours, Robert. I'm afraid you'll be kind of handling a couple of these secondary school equivalency exams. This was another.
Actually, no, we dumped that on Bill.
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
All right, there you go, Bill.
Yeah.
It's yours.
Yeah, it's all mine.
It's all yours, Bill.
I'm even prepared. As I did the research on this, it reminded me of my doctoral work at Washington State University. I took a course on community colleges, and we did a complete chapter on the GED. And the GED, I think, is sort of a unique American idea. The notion was that there were lots of people who didn't complete high school at some later point in their lives. They wanted, either because they wanted a job or they wanted access to higher education, or for whatever reason, they decided to go and get the GED. And that enabled them to basically say they were high school graduates, and also to basically say, I'm eligible for this level of employment. All the credential agencies that now do work in this particular area rely upon a credential like this to certify that individuals do have the equivalent of a high school education, and then that qualifies them for any number of jobs which they generally would not be qualified for otherwise. So in EDGE, what we've always tried to do is document in EDGE what you're going to see on your desk, either at a credential agency or particularly at a university where you don't always see everything. I was at the University of Texas for quite a while, and was in this field for 25 years. And there was a lot that you don't see when you're at an institution that you do see when you're in a credential agency, just because of the nature of the work and the people who are coming to you with different credentials. This sort of falls under both headings, okay? So if you're in a credential agency, you're going to see a lot of degrees from overseas, and this is just 3 examples that are here: Canada, South Korea, and the Philippines, where they've created similar type credentials to the GED in the United States, and that's actually a pretty good way to think about it at the beginning point. And it exists for exactly the same sorts of reasons. Somebody's older and they want access to higher education, or they need employment. Now, if you go to each one of these, the high school equivalency diploma in Canada, the graduation equivalency examination in South Korea, the alternative learning system accreditation in the Philippines, and you do the research, you see that they're all essentially 12-year degrees. They all essentially grant access to higher education, and they're all used for the same purpose that the GED is used in the United States. Now, in EDGE, this came up because in EDGE, if you're sitting at, Cochise Community College in Arizona, you're not likely to have seen any, you may not ever have seen some of these credentials. What we try to do is make sure that whatever is in EDGE is something that you can sort of access and get a basic answer to. But many people who use EDGE aren't totally expert as some of the people who run credential agencies are, but you do have to look at 400 or 500 evaluations every year and know what to do. EDGE is designed to help you do 90% of that. So with that said, Emily Say, who is at IERF in Los Angeles International Educational Research Foundation, Emily's an excellent professional, and she suggested that because not all of these credentials are posted in EDGE, that we develop this as a way of letting you know that these are the types of credentials that you're going to see from time to time. And generally, if you're at a university, for example, if you see something like this, you have to make the switch and say, I'm not going to see the normal secondary school leaving credential from this country, but I am going to see this. And then if you have questions, you can either A, ask, go to a listserv and ask, or B, do what I did, which is you just Google the item, you check it out, you see what it is, you see that perhaps they're all 12-year credentials, they all give access to higher education in the country that they're from. And if you're looking at it and developing an institutional policy in Nebraska or something, you look at it and you go, well, I think this person is eligible to be considered for admission to higher education. You may have other requirements, but they fundamentally have met the high school requirement. So that's why this is on the agenda today. That's why this note is going into EDGE. And if you have questions down the line, I'd be glad to answer them. Okay, so next slide, Jasmine or Annetta. Okay.
Thank you, Bill. That was wonderful. And now Macedonia with Robert.
Yes, one of the problems, first of all, EDGE has a number of features to it that are just absolutely amazing. And of course, chief of which is it's a dynamic process. Unlike the old books that most of us grew up on or involved in and worked on. Jasmine and I were on a Canada workshop together and so forth. Once that book was published, that was it. There could be no changes, even if the system changed. And so the beauty of EDGE is it's dynamic. And so we can make changes at any time as changes develop within that country. But also we had problems with EDGE. And one of the problems we had, one of the challenges we met, was that we had a great deal of pressure on us to roll this thing out. We've been talking about it, we've been working on it, we've been developing it, and we thought we could get away with just the top countries that the Immigration Service were seeing in terms of visas and schools were seeing in their classrooms and so forth, in their admissions offices. But we were told that we needed to include every country. And so we did, and we got it out. We rolled it out about 15 years ago at high speed. The problem is some of those countries were not always fully fleshed out. And the other problem is that educational systems change over time. And so sometimes we can do a few of the simple changes like we've just highlighted for you, those 3 that we've talked about, or we need an absolute makeover. All right. And Macedonia is an example of that. So we looked to Alex Popovsky, the president of UCREDO, which is an endorsed member of AICE, the Association of International Credential Evaluators. And Alex, himself Macedonian, came up with a complete redo of Macedonia. And we've got it. I think you heard Jasmine say a little bit earlier that we're now grappling with it in the IESC. It's really sailing through pretty quickly. He did a marvelous job, a fantastic job. We're kind of struggling a little bit though with some professional degrees, particularly law. We've had in these past webinars, we've talked about this or touched on this a little bit, where we say first professional degree in whatever that profession is, such as pharmacy, such as medicine, such as law, and so forth. And we're grappling with that a little bit. And once we resolve that, I think we're in a position to finally get all of Alex's work into EDGE. Meanwhile, however, even if we don't make it in the next 2 weeks, when the ACRO conference formally opens, you will be able to see, and if you'll go to the next slide, you will be able to see that there will be a session profile on Macedonia that Alex has given. I will introduce him and then I will get out of his way and he'll present the results of his findings insofar as he can in 50 minutes. In fact, folks, we just taped that yesterday, and it'll be interesting to see how you all take it, but he did a marvelous job, and I think you'll really find out a great deal of information with regard to Macedonia. He'll even explain to you the name. And with that, I'm not going to say any more about that. If it comes up in questions, I'm going to dodge it. So back to you, Jasmine.
Thank you. Yes, Macedonian is not my forte either, so we'll leave it to for the native person. Please mark your calendars for these two wonderful sessions that our country profile author Alex Popovsky, as Robert has indicated, will be providing on Macedonia, as well as our two fellow candidates, Rosalie and Loida, who have worked diligently and really hard on compiling this wonderful report on the Caribbean offshore medical school. So these two are conference presentations sponsored by our IESC team. So mark your calendars. I've already done that and I'm so looking forward to listening to that. Moving on to our next slide is our IESC Fellowship program. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about this. We've had a wonderful turnout of applicants for the 2021 fellowship program. And if you're wondering what this is an opportunity for those of you who are in the field of international education, who are kind of new to it, and you want to take a deep dive and do a research project that is related to our field. This is a wonderful opportunity for you. This is the closest we can come to what Robert, Bill, and I have were fortunate to be participants of, which was the peer workshop reports. These were the projects for international education research that used to occur rather regularly about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And they were sponsored by groups such as ACRO and NAFSA and USAID and so forth, where we literally would look into a specific country and research their education system and prepare publications. So the fellowship program is the closest right now that we can provide you via IESC. It's an application, is available each year, and you go through the application process. You're then vetted by the IESC, and 2 candidates are then selected. So our new candidates for the year 2021-2022 are Rebecca Jacob and Haley Clemenhage, and both are showing great enthusiasm already to be part of the IESC, and we look forward to assigning them their research project. Thank you. And I guess we can move on to our next slide.
Hey, Jasmine, thanks for talking about all that. This is Drew Carlisle, the Assistant Director for EDGE Development. I'm one of the people that you might get in touch with if you ever shoot an email over to EDGE. That's probably going to be me or one of my colleagues. Yeah, just to piggyback on what Jasmine was talking about, for those that were interested in applying, like, thank you so much. We really appreciate all of those applications that we received. And it's for folks that are in the first 5 years of their careers of evaluating credentials. So it's something that really will set people on a good path for learning best practices, for understanding good research techniques, and you really get the mentorship and all of the experience and knowledge that the IESC has put together. And as we mentioned, it culminates in a presentation of that assigned research project at the ACRO annual meeting. So you get some presentation experience as well. It's a great all around professional development opportunity. Switching over to when you want to reach out to us, like I said, I'm probably the person that you're going to be speaking with in a manner of speaking when you shoot an email over. But if you're trying to connect with colleagues, let me highly recommend the International Activities Listserv. This is a place where you're going to interact with admissions officers, evaluation agencies, ACRO employees, folks that are interested and knowledgeable and about international education, about comparative evaluation. This is a great place where you can go and ask your questions and to give your answers. This is a fairly collaborative field, I found, and it's a wonderful place where you can share that information. I would also just recommend that in the resources section within Edge, if there is a primary source for a list of recognized institutions, we're going to have that posted right there in the resources section within Edge. And if there's not a posted resource there, sometimes the best that we can do is come up with a static list. Now, that's not the best practice, but it is better than nothing. It means that at some point, this institution was recognized, and that's a starting point for you to continue your research. I would just direct you to look over there when you've got questions about the recognition status of a particular institution. But another place that you can always go is right to that listserv to ask your questions. If you're trying to come up with how another university came up with their institutional policies, this is where you can go and find out what they did with that 11-year secondary document from Mongolia when it was still in those 11 years. Now, that's when you want to go to the listserv. When you want to contact the IESC directly, that's when Edge is missing something that deserves inclusion. That's if there needs to be a grading scale update, something that you've encountered on a transcript. That's when there's a credential that you have sitting there in front of you and we don't have it listed within the database. Or if you have good primary resources that would be valuable to share with everyone, please reach out to us. On every page within Edge, there's actually a contact us button, and that'll shoot us a ping right over with your note, and you can let us know what we need to get in there. I or one of my colleagues will be reaching back out to you and saying, hey, you've mentioned this new credential. Can you provide that redacted copy of that credential? We'd love to be able to look at it. As Jasmine and Bill both mentioned, the IESC, they are all volunteers. And so providing this information will make it easier for them to start their research and to come to those conclusions on how best to serve the entire community. So the contact us, that's when we're missing a credential, that's when we're missing a grading scale, that's when there's a resource that needs to be in there. And that international activities listserv, that's when you're trying to connect with your colleagues and you just might even not know where to start. That's a great place to start. Can we have the next slide, please? So in the new Edge, one of the things that we have done is we've been providing emergent news updates. When you go to any country, you're going to find a list of articles that have been coming out that are going to be relevant to you when you're trying to better understand the system that a student is coming out of. As with all of the impacts that COVID has, with all of the impacts that COVID has had on all walks of life. One of the things that we thought would be really helpful would be if there was one place that you could go to to learn the status of particular exams. And as Jonathan, who you can see here on this slide, as Jonathan has been going through and compiling all of these news articles, he's been creating a spreadsheet. And on that spreadsheet, there's links to all of this information that's coming from news sources from all around the world, talking about delays in exams, talking about cancellations of exams, talking about policies of different ministries that are going to be changing the way that there's some grading done on these exams. All of this is going to be found in the International Exams Status Report. You can go, so this is not in EDGE at the moment. This is, you go to the main ACRO website, and you're actually going to find it in the resources section. There's an international section there. If you click on international, you'll be taken to a list. There's a bunch of great resources and references, webinars, some white papers. And one of the things that's listed is this International Exam Status Report. You can go on there, you can look to see what the status of a particular exam is. You can look to see the source information, where we came up with that information. And if you have more information, something that you've read, Jonathan's contact information is both on that spreadsheet as well as here within this PowerPoint. As always, all of these webinars are going to be available online shortly after we get through the webinar. Not immediately, but check back in the next few days. But if you have things that you want to reach out to Jonathan to inform him of, his contact information is there. And this is, again, in that collaborative spirit of working together, sharing the best information that we can. Yeah. Can we see the next slide, please, Summer? I think before we get going, I believe that we were going to set up a poll. We're trying to figure out who is here participating in this EDGE user group today. What segment of the population are you? Are you an institutional staff member? Do you work at an evaluation service? Are you a member of a government entity, or are you working in collaboration with a law firm? And have you been to a user group before? We're just curious how many of you have been here and how many of you subscribe to EDGE. This just gives us a better idea about who's here in the room with us. All right. I think we're going to give it just about another couple of seconds, and we'll close this poll. It's pretty clear that we've got a lot of institutional staff that's present. We have some representation from evaluation agencies as well, and close to a third of you. This is the first time that you've come to this user group. This is going to be something that we do on a monthly basis, something that you're going to be able to come in and check for those updates. Now, also within the new EDGE, you'll notice that on the homepage, right when you log in, at the bottom, there is a list of the most recent updates that stretch across all countries. You'll find all of those as well as emergent news items right there on the homepage for you. And with that, I would like to open it up for any questions that y'all have today. You can put it directly into the Q&A, and we'll try to go through those piece by piece and answer what we can. And if there aren't any questions in particular, let's see.
Hi, Drew. This is Annetta. I actually
Annetta.
do have a couple of questions. Well, one really, what upcoming things should we be looking towards? You guys have been you've been doing such a good job with keeping us updated on everything that EDGE is doing in terms of changes. What are you guys looking forward to in the next couple of months?
Well, so one of the things, thanks for that, Annetta. One of the things that's been happening is that folks have been taking advantage of the Contact Us. They have been reaching out, and there's actually a list of questions that have been growing for the IESC that we address in the order in which they come in the order in which everything is assembled to allow that evaluation to proceed. So there are lots of questions that have come in about law degrees and other regulated professions. We've got questions about that need to clarify some particular grading scales and some, I can't even get into all of the questions that have come in, but there's a good list of, I can think of 15 or 20 questions that have come in where folks are curious about these particular items. The big thing I would say is the regulated professions. That's something that we're really trying to make sure that we have good language around, so that we can really describe in a way that's understandable how to incorporate all of these learners, their pathways into their education future, their employment future, because we do know that not all systems are going to follow that exact same pattern.
Thank you for that, Drew. And I just want to give a big thanks to all the individuals who keep us so busy. The questions are just wonderful. As you said, we have a long list of questions, and I do appreciate everyone's patience, because to get through the questions, to do our in-house research, and being that we're a volunteer group, we do appreciate your patience with us. Things don't happen overnight. We do take a while to go through these bit by bit and meet. Our group meets once every 2 weeks. We only have 1 hour to discuss this, but we do a lot of discussion via email. And again, I just want folks to be patient with us, because some things may not be responded to immediately within 24 hours, but we do get to them in the order that they come in, and you do keep us on our toes. So we do appreciate that. And I've seen some wonderful comments in the chat who say they just love EDGE. And we love it too, and it's just great to hear that feedback, so that we know that the work we're all doing is being of benefit to the users. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
So some of the questions that have been coming in, Brittany was curious, is there any more information on the on-demand trainings? Annetta, would you like to speak to the on-demand trainings for just a moment?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Annetta Stroud, Associate Director for Content and Curriculum with ACRO, and we are really excited to be able to launch our online international credential evaluation series. We have currently 10 courses that we are going to be opening up to the public at the end of this month, and it's really exciting. These courses will cover the foundations and the methodologies of our profession, along with applications for transfer credit. And then we have 8 country series, which each course will be focused on 8 different countries or regions. And we're just really excited because of course, with COVID, everybody was pushed to really find different avenues of delivering training and education, right? And so ACRO was also pushed in that direction. And so it really gave us the impetus to really go ahead and put the resources into providing our membership with these professional development opportunities online. And so we're really excited. So definitely, I put the URL in the chat, so please go ahead and sign up if you'd like to go ahead and follow us, and definitely look towards the end of this month, beginning of April, for a hard launch with our international series of online courses.
Thanks, Annetta. There's a question that's come in from Lisa, and I think that the council would be able to help with this. So Lisa asks, I would love to learn more in the future about how students request documents from various institution systems. Is there an equivalent of a registrar's office in every country?
I'll jump on that one, Drew. Generally speaking, yes. It depends on the country. In the case of India, for example, it may be that you want a document from the controller of exams because they're an exam-based system, which follows essentially the UK model. On the other hand, you may have a registration secretary's office. Most of the time, universities in other countries literally have something called the Office of the Registrar or Registrar's Office. So, so you'll probably find fairly quickly what that office is that handles the student records and is the sole keeper of those records, and that's who you want. Let's use an example of a situation where it could be problematic. One would be China. And when we do the institutes, and a moment ago, Annetta Stroud was telling you about the on-demand courses. These are what are substituting for our in-person summer and winter institutes that ACRO used to put on, and maybe will one day again. But whenever Annetta presented on China, she would talk about transnational education, situations where you get a transcript from a well-known university, let's say Renmin University in China, but it's from the Office of International Programs. And the courses don't look like the normal courses that Chinese students do. Well, the fact of the matter is that person's not enrolled at Renmin University. They're admitted through a pathway program put on by, offered by the one section of the university that is not the central authority, not the central registrar, not the academic secretary or someone that would keep the records of that institution for admitted students and students getting their degrees. These are outside programs that have been latched onto, and that Renmin maybe is collecting rent on the office space that they're allowing this organization to use. Or maybe it's an official office, but it's an office that doesn't have the authority to award degrees or admit people. So that's where something like this in your question that you've posed is important. Make sure that you're getting the information from a central authority office that oversees student records and student grades and an award of degrees.
And I'd like to say something too. I think one of the problems that people face in the field, especially if you're in an institution, is the students telling you they can't get a credential, they can't get a diploma, something's gone on in their country or whatever. And over the course of doing this for the last 35 years, we have found that occasionally that's true. Occasionally a situation will develop in a country, Haiti, for example, where they're not able to get documents out of the country, or the basic structure has broken down. Sometimes it's very hard to figure out if that's true, and that sometimes that's misrepresented by people from certain regions and certain countries. So the only way to really ferret that out is research and by asking your colleagues. Is it, for example, in the day, it would have been, are the Vietnamese really having trouble getting documents out of their country after the war? Or do the Cubans really not allow people to carry their transcripts with them, and our universities prevent them from sending them directly to institutions in the United States? In both cases, those were true. I could cite several others where it wasn't true and you heard about it all the time. So that's an ongoing problem for the field that only gets resolved by research and then sort of a consensus among the experts.
This is Jasmine. Thanks for that, Bill. That's a great point of insight. One thing that I just wanted to reiterate is that there are times that applicants, because of just not wanting to take, go that extra step to get their documents, they may present you with some excuses. One that we just recently heard was is a student from Nigeria, and he said that his university was currently on strike, which is not unusual. These things happen. But what we did was we checked the university's website. We even did sort of an internet search about has there been strikes in Nigeria, and particularly at this institution, and we didn't come up with anything that supported that claim. What we did find was on the institution's website, they literally have a page dedicated to requesting official transcripts. And so we shared that link with the applicant saying that this should not be a problem. And there was evidence that the university was still operating because they had on their calendar an upcoming meeting of their board members and so forth. And they confirmed that they were not on strike when we sent them an email. So that there are occasions that we do need to take that extra step on our parts to double check the information that students may be giving us. But and to answer the question about whether they have a registrar or not, many of these institutions are switching to digitally archiving their documents, and orders can be placed via their website portals for their students. So become more familiar with that. Check the university websites and see what offices make this possible, and or what third-party platforms that are nationally and internationally recognized that provide for release of official documents.
Well, thank you all very much. I don't know if you noticed over in the chat, but Annetta provided a link that that links over to the Article 26 Backpack Project, which may have some helpful guidelines for displaced students. I can't recommend highly enough that if you are encountering students that are coming to you that have faced significant difficulties, there may be some advice in this signature initiative that will help you to make some policies that are appropriate for your institution. So we have a question that came in from Wang Yun that says, so Russia, it's hard language to learn and or to compare symbols from the documents we received from students versus the examples that are on the EDGE pages. Is it true that a diploma supplement in English is always available from the institutions?
I'll take that one on. The answer to that basically is yes. The whole idea behind Bologna signatory agreements to be part of the process was that you would do four things. One, you would have a system of new degrees that were based on a first cycle, second cycle, third cycle approach. That furthermore, secondly, those degrees would be based on an accumulation of credits and thus awarded based on the accumulation of a certain number of credits. And thirdly, that those credits would in fact be ECTS credits, and it would be shown transparently through the means of a diploma supplement. And in that diploma supplement, the bad news is they're not always consistent, not only country to country, but sometimes institution to institution within the same country. When the process first began, a Dutch colleague sent around to all his colleagues at other higher education institutions in the Netherlands to see their diploma supplement, and was chagrined to see that they differed school to school. The point is that they are different depending on the country and the institution sometimes. But the good news is they're supposed to do several things. Number one, say exactly how this degree is situated within the country's educational system, that it name clearly what the credential is and how many ECTS it's worth, what it leads to, what's required to enter the program. Then, of course, something like you've seen in EDGE, the ladder page that we have, that's supposed to be included in the diploma supplement. And finally, that supplement is supposed to be in English and the native and the language of the country. So yes, the Russian diploma supplement should be in both Russian, Cyrillic, and in English. Now, I need to say to our questioner one final thing. One thing that's very important in this business is to learn transcriptese. And that means to learn enough of a language, at least reading it, not necessarily carrying on a conversation in the language, but to be able to read key academic terms in that language so that you can look at an original language document and be able to pick out important things. the only language that I took in school, high school and university at UT Austin, was German. Okay, so I can read German. I can even speak it to a certain extent as I lose it over the years. But I can read, and never had instruction in, but can read Spanish and French and Italian and a number of others through transcriptees. And that's important to do. Now, I agree that when the alphabet changes, it gets to be a little more difficult. I have a horrible time with Chinese. Annetta has no problem, but I do. Russian is not easy either, but I know enough Russian terminology on a document to be able to figure out what I'm looking at and so on. So I encourage you to try to develop that skill set as well. And we do that a lot in the institutes. And I suspect, Annetta, that when you put your on-demand courses together, that there'll be some aspect of transcriptees that you'll talk about.
Absolutely, Robert. That is such a key in our profession, right? Is making sure that we are using indigenous language documents whenever we can. And China is absolutely one of those cases where that becomes transcriptees just becomes absolutely imperative. And you're totally correct. We did incorporate that into our online courses.
And so it's not exactly answering the same question, but one of the new features of Edge 3.0 is that we are now able to put in more characters. So non-Latin scripts, Cyrillic, character-based languages, we do have more ability to put that in. And so because it is a best practice to work with native language documents, we are adding more and more examples of the credential in the native name with the native script to make that easier for you to understand. Anytime you have a romanization or a translation from one of these languages into English, there's a little bit of room for interpretation, and we want to make sure that it's easier to figure out what you're looking at. And let's see. Todd Colvard actually reached out and was sharing some helpful information, saying that TISEP is currently holding a series of webinars on electronic documents and electronic document verification. Todd suggests that it would be useful if Edge could coordinate with TISEP to get this info into Edge's resources, and it would be useful for users. I completely agree with that. TISEP is a wonderful organization. We have representatives on the council that are members of TISEP. Jasmine, would you like to speak about TISEP for just a moment?
Sure. In fact, I just spoke about their series of that they're doing the webinars on digital document platforms. They pretty much this entire month is dedicated to that, and they have guests from various whether they're government organizations that have this availability or third-party platforms or institutionals. They have recordings of all of the presentations. In fact, I shared those recordings with members of our association, which is the Association for International Credential Evaluators. It's a valuable series of webinars. I urge everyone to go on TISEP's website and take advantage of these. If you're a member of TISEP, I think this is accessible for free. I mean, the information is there on their website, so take advantage. There's still some more of the webinars lined up for the month, and you could also access the recordings.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. And we also had a question about, are these going to be recorded and available for you to reference later on the ACRO website? Yes, I will. Oh, look, it's there in the chat now, the link for all of ACRO's past webinars. We'll give it just another minute, see if there's any other questions that y'all have. Pretty great to have the members of the IESC available to answer these questions. It's like you get a little mini fellowship. You're not getting a research project assigned, but you are getting a lot of good information.
I like the mini fellowship. It's good.
Well, All right, can we move on to that next slide, please? One thing that you may want to consider if you are doing a mini research project is the Gloria R. Nathanson Research Fund for International Education. It is a way to help to defray some of the costs that are associated with doing research. If you're looking to create a new profile to go into EDGE, that's something that would be eligible. If you're doing substantive country updates that are really providing lots of good new primary sourced information, that's the type of thing that this fund would support. White papers that are on interesting topics. Robert, you wrote a white paper with Emily Say on French Grand Écoles not too long ago. That's an example of the type of thing that this research fund should be used for. So if you go onto the ACRO website, hover over our research and publications, there's actually a link right to the International Research Grant right there from the homepage of ACRO. And then on the next slide, we have a little bit more about the online courses that Annetta referenced just a little bit earlier. Annetta, I think you pretty well covered it earlier with everything that was going on. We are excited about the integrated digital badging. That'll be something that you can show up and it'll verify what you have done. Something puts a stamp on that knowledge that you have.
Absolutely, Drew. Hi, this is Annetta again. And yeah, so one of the really exciting features that we are launching along with our on-demand learning series is that we are integrating our ACRO badging system with these courses. And so once you complete the course and pass your final assessment, you will be granted an ACRO badge. And this is really exciting. We are super excited to be launching the badging structure. And we're going to be doing this through all of our professional proficiencies, not just international, but we did decide to launch with international first because we did see an actual need and a gap in the knowledge within the profession. So we did want to actually start here first. And so we are super excited to, again, offer our members this opportunity. And again, looking towards that the 1st of April.
And let's not forget about the conference coming up here in a couple of weeks. I joked to Jasmine at one of our EDGE meetings that this is the cheapest ACRO conference I've ever attended. No hotel, no meals, no plane tickets, just a registration fee that was significantly less than what I paid in the past. And as far as the international section goes, we're going to have, in fact, I missed a meeting of committee chairs because they schedule it for this same time period, but they were getting together talking about the sessions that they're going to have, and there's going to be about 20 of them, certainly down from the usual 35 or so that we have in an in-person conference, but there'll be a number of good ones. One not mentioned here was the one that Drew just mentioned. Emily and I will do a presentation on the French Grand École. She talking about business, and I talked about the engineering piece. So that's another session that will be available at the upcoming conference. So I encourage you to do it, even if it costs a little bit more to register late. Do it.
Thank you, Robert. I'm looking forward to the conference. I'm looking forward to getting to be able to go from session to session without needing to run from place to place. That's I'm looking forward to that. And then I would just encourage everyone on the last slide. There are different ways that you can stay informed with ACRO. You can join the EDGE mailing list. You can join the International Activities Listserv that I mentioned earlier on. Staying connected to the ACRO community by subscribing to Connect. That's a free resource that's available to you and will really let you know more of what ACRO is working on. There are lots of great ways to stay in touch with us. Please reach out with any of your questions. Please connect with one another and share that information on the International Activities Listserv. And thank you so much for joining us today. Jasmine, Bill, Robert, Annetta,
Thank
greatly
you.
appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Drew.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much,
Thanks a lot,
everyone.
Drew.
Hey, au revoir.
See you next month.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Mhm.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Ciao.
Ciao.